Hello and welcome to episode 117 of Third and Wrong. I'm your co-host, Stephen Bullen, and I'm joined right beside me in the flesh, Mr. Austin Dowlonga. We are both double vaccinated, so this is safe and legal. Good.
I can even get this close.
Yeah, even uncomfortable. It's a very sweaty episode of Third and Wrong. It's, as you know, we're all going through the heat wave, and this is no exception. Auzzie chose a great time to come down to Calgary and spend some time of his vacation up here with me, and just enjoying some good quality bro time. Yeah, kicked his ass in Madden once. He beat me in another game. The rubber match is tonight, so that'll be fun. But let's dive into it, Auzzie. So, as you know, CFL season, we're super excited. I don't know where to look, whether you or at the camera. That's not often we do this, so at all. It's for the very first time we've recorded right beside each other and not had Zach with us, so this is new territory, but we are going to
we'll bounce around between looking at the camera. I think we got like 4 views on YouTube approximately, so the 4 viewers will find this awkward, but everybody else should, like our listeners, should be fine.
Absolutely. And so, as we know, CFL season August 5th, and we're super fired up for that. And so we figured, leading up to the season in just a little over a month, let's work through and go through team by team and just review kind of where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, some of the big storylines, and of course a record prediction, and then we can kind of do an all-encompassing one at the very end. So these can change just like they do with our NFL ones. Had Dallas going 11-5, and then maybe that changes to 9-7, just as it kind of did last year and stuff. So probably gonna pick the Riders to go 14-0, and that's gonna stay consistent right through. But you know what? We're really excited. So today we're going to be covering the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Montreal Alouettes, obviously our 2 favorite teams. And so we figured what better way to do this than to start with those 2 teams.
That's true, yeah. We haven't had a you and I live episode since I think our Jimmy G debate.
That would have been back in May or June of 2019, 2 years ago,
man.
Which ages me greatly because it feels like we haven't been doing this for 2 years, but here we are. So let's first start, instead of going by strength and weaknesses of teams, I wanted to kind of approach this from the area of which quarterback who, sprung onto the scene in 2019 can take that next step and be the franchise quarterback. Obviously, we had Cody Fajardo and Vernon Adams, carry their teams to some really great heights in their respective seasons. Both had some tumultuous times as well. Vernon Adams struggled with interceptions. Cody Fajardo struggled with that back injury, and sometimes had some dud games where he, maybe threw for a touchdown, no picks kind of game, things like that, where he just, teams just kind of figured him out. That Labor Day Classic is a good example where like he played well, but it didn't reflect on the stat sheet. So I guess we'll go to you, Auzzie. In your opinion, between Vernon Adams and Cody Fajardo, who can really take that next step, or who will be the one to take that step and fully cement themselves as a franchise quarterback?
Well, I think I don't like the phrasing of that. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I think both of them are franchise quarterbacks for sure. But as far as like who would be better, Cody Fajardo did show us more, but okay, actually, I won't.
So I'll phrase it like this. So we know like Jonathan Jennings in 2016 kind of came onto the scene, and everyone's like, holy crap, I think he was called the CFL Russell Wilson at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And years later, he's out of the league now. He had his shot in Ottawa in 2019 to try to revive his career, and that didn't go well. Who, I guess, to flip it, who's more at risk of maybe being the next Jonathan Jennings out of these 2 quarterbacks? And if it's neither, it's neither. I mean, both are really competent, but that, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, they both look like franchise guys, but I mean, so did Jonathan Jennings.
That's true. I was a big Jonathan Jennings fan, which shows my QB scouting potential. But I would say the guy that has the potential of having that trajectory would be Vernon Adams, because the way I view him is very boom or bust, and that was evident in his play as his first year as a starter. And so he does take a lot of risks. I'm hoping that he can kind of figure it out a little bit. He was really just learning on the fly a lot last, 2019, going from presumably the backup in week 1 to all of a sudden, okay, you're actually our starter. So I mean, he did have all year to figure it out, and I think that he did, but it's still, like you like to point out a couple months ago when we had a conversation about this, that he had a lot of turnover worthy
interceptable
or
passes.
interceptable passes. Yeah, that's right. So I would say that Cody Fajardo has that, like he's already kind of at that point where he threw for a lot of yards, and I think he might have even been the league leader in passing or close to it. And he led his team to what, 14 wins or 13
wins. Yeah.
So yeah, that was really incredible.
Yeah, goalpost away from the Grey Cup.
Oh, I remember watching that one.
Yeah, same actually. Yeah, not fun. I guess too, and like it's kind of funny. Both our franchise quarterbacks here have a similar trajectory in that they weren't the week one starter. Zach Calero suffered that dirty hit, dirty, in week one, and Cody Fajardo sprung onto the scene in week two. And same with Vernon Adams. Pipkin was the starter, which is really weird to think about now. He's vying for maybe a third string spot in Toronto now, just 2 years later. And Vernon Adams sprung onto the scene, and it was really cool. I think both quarterbacks have a really bright future. I'm biased. I'm going with Cody Fajardo, but I really think Jason Maas, the new offensive coordinator in Saskatchewan, can help take his game to the next level and maybe shore up some of those deficiencies in his game and really make sure he's building to his strengths. Obviously, we know Cody and Vernon both have they can use their feet a lot in helping them bail out of pressure situations. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jason Maas can bring to the table. Obviously, not really highly regarded as a head coach. A lot of his decision making in like the fourth quarter was questioned. His teams are undisciplined, often the most penalized in the league. But just strictly from an X's and O's perspective, I think we can really see Cody take that next step. And he threw for 4,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, 8 picks. I think we can see him throw for that high 20s touchdowns, kind of like similar to what Mike Riley did in his prime. So not calling him the next Mike Riley, because I know that's like, you don't want to venture into that kind of hot takeiness, but I think he can take that next step. On the flip side, Vernon Adams has the majority of his offense coming back. And we're going to get into that a little later, because one of the Riders' biggest weaknesses happens to be the offensive line, which can severely hinder his ability to, win this debate. Whereas Vernon Adams seems to have a lot of returning cast coming back. So I think we'll call this one a wash, Auzzie. I think both have a pretty good shot. I'm not sure we're going to convince any of our listeners to go one way or another. Unless, of course, they're wearing a watermelon on their head at that moment, or whatever Alouettes fans.
I don't know what we do. We just have bird shirts. So
there you go, bird shirts.
Best logo in the league, though.
Also, can we not? I feel like every time we hear the Montreal plays Saskatchewan, hear the same thing when New England plays Seattle. It's like, oh, it's a Super Bowl 49 rematch, or it's the Grey Cup. What was that? Grey Cup 97 rematch. I'm like, it's been 11 fucking years. Like, we don't need to call it the rematch anymore.
The teams are nothing close to resembling.
So I just want to bury that, because A, both very painful, and B, I don't want to see the highlight anymore of too many men or the pick on the one. So let's move to the coaching staff here, Auzzie. I mentioned Jason Maas, but going to the head coaches, we are both very fortunate in that Craig Dickenson and Khari Jones are coming back. And, both extremely vital to the team's success. Obviously, the Riders 2 years ago in February were left high and dry when Chris Jones abandoned us for the Cleveland Browns, and then he has since taken over as a head coach at his old high school. So just a wild career path for that guy. You never know where life will take you. But Craig Dickenson really came in and stabilized the franchise. He was the special teams coordinator and really leads with that teacher first mantra. And so I was worried. I was like, I didn't know how well a special teams coordinator can come in and take over. Up to that point, Mike O'Shea hadn't won a Grey Cup. So the track record wasn't great with his background in special teams. So I was really just curious as to what that would look like. And much to Riderville's pleasure, it was all great things. Just incredible. He was able to really be a calming presence there. So and he obviously had Coach of the Year nomination, but that ultimately went to Orlando Steinauer and Hamilton. On the flip side, Khari Jones, I think, should have been nominated as well for really raising that franchise from the depths of hell from which it came. Post Calvillo to 2019 was really a dark period that saw many quarterbacks come through, many head coaches come through, NFL retreads, you name it, they came through, they failed. But Khari Jones and, like Chris Aki said in our interview last month, really came in and set up the culture there. And it's tough to build the culture. I think where Craig Dickenson had the advantages, he was already coming in with a pretty loaded roster. Chris Jones did do a good job of building that roster, but Khari Jones really had to build this thing from the ground up. So What are your takes on it? I'm actually leaning towards Khari Jones. I think he would probably be the more likely candidate in 2021 to win head coach of the year.
Yeah. The Alouettes in 2019 went 10-8, and they had a lot of brutal losses. Otherwise, I think that they could have really, like, I think it comes down to the success. Like, Steinauer was so successful with losing Mazzoli and then still going on to win 15 games.
Yeah.
So it was like, this is not a good year for it. But you're right. Like, Khari Jones, I think if they would have won maybe a couple more games, and then I guess, like, with the Ticats doing so good, like, it was just there could have been some debate there, but
Yeah.
if you can win 12 games or something like that, because you're barely 500, it's like, and then the Rough Riders as well, like, they were doing so well. So I think success, it's kind of like the MVP conversation, right? It's like if a player is on a shitty team, but he's like putting up MVP type numbers, Russell Wilson, for example. Just kidding. Yeah, like if they're on a crappy team and losing team, then they're not going to get the nomination. So I think success did play a part there. But yeah, this year with as we're going to get into it, this will be the second time alluding to it, with the offensive pieces coming back for the Alouettes. I think that we're poised for some success, and I think that success in a shortened season with Khari Jones at the calling all the shots, I think that would be very likely
a recipe for success.
Yeah, a recipe for success.
Other candidates I know, and we'll probably cover this when we cover other teams leading up to the CFL kickoff, but I mean, Jamie Elizondo, if I'm pronouncing that right, with Edmonton, has a really big task in front of him. Mm-hmm. Kind of same situation as Saskatchewan, where God, what's his face now? I can't even remember it. Scott Milanovich just kind of left him high and dry. He's like, peace, going to Jacksonville. Or no, he went to Indianapolis, somewhere in the South. And South being the United States. I know Indianapolis isn't in the South like Jacksonville. I had to clarify that. But that's another candidate if he's able to really get that team rocking and rolling as well. But for the sake of this argument, I think Khari Jones really has a great shot. Mm-hmm. I think Greg Dickenson now, that was a nice first season for him, but now there's expectations. So I think that shines worn off. And unless they go like 14-0, it's going to be tough to really give him, like, he might get the West nomination, but if I were to put him head to head with Khari Jones, I think that's going to Khari. So
yeah, exactly.
You bet. So let's talk about the biggest strengths of the team. We'll start with the positives. And, with Saskatchewan, there was a lot of turnover on some different areas, especially on defense, the loss of Charleston Hughes, Cameron Judge. I'm probably missing a lot more. Offensively, on the offensive line, Brandon Labatt's gone, Dakota Shepley, Darius Bladick. But let's talk about the strengths. And I think, right now,
the positives, back to the
positives. Paxton Lynch really solidifies this quarterback. I was going to cover it after, but I had to tee it off. But
there you go.
I'm assuming he'll be competing with Isaac Harker, Luke Falk, Tim Flacco. I think it's Tom, and Mason Fine for the backup quarterback spot. But
wow, some big names at backup quarterback.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, yeah,
Luke Falk, the 199th pick, the next Brady.
Oh, that never happened. But I think the Riders' biggest strength is the skill position. And it's funny because we were talking about NFL-wise, how you want to build a team from the trenches out. I think the Riders really did do that. And I'll talk about it when we talk about their weaknesses. But the Riders have invested in their O-line, but unfortunately factors outside of their control have kind of dismantled that. But their Riders receiving core is really, really something to write home about, and something that excites me, especially with Jason Moss and Cody Fajardo coming back. I mean, start with Shaq Evans, who just really electrified the team in 2019 and took that leadership role playing the X receiver, absolutely built for it. And, as Naaman Roosevelt's game kind of aged, he took over like the workhorse style and, of getting the majority of the targets and everything, which was really excited. Behind him, Paul McRoberts, who I'm really excited about, not really well known in a lot of circles, but I think he has the physical traits to really excel at that position. At slot back, you have Justin McInnes and Braden Linus, and Jake Hardy and Picton, who all Canadians could potentially thrive in that spot. So, take your pick and you're going to have a ratio breaker there. Jordan Williams-Lambert really came onto the scene in 2018 and was kind of like the main target in an otherwise sleepy offense that was led by Zach Collaros then. I think that was more had to do with Stephen McAdoo than really Zach Collaros' fault. He really just I don't know what happened. Like in 2017, Kevin Glenn was airing it out. We had 3,000-yard receivers, and in 2018, he's like, "No, we're just gonna run it. We're gonna run the football." And I was like, "What happened here?" But Williams Lambert was like the main target in that offense. Came back in 2019, and after an NFL stint, thought he was gonna pick up where he left off, and had a pretty disappointing second half of the CFL season. I'm not giving up on him quite yet. I think he can really still be a difference maker. And if he can kind of regain some of that 2018 form, that's another strong receiver in the room there. And then Kyron Moore, I mean, what can you say about him? Like total game breaker, total game changer. Give him the ball and on a crossing route, he can take it 90 yards. You give it to him on a seam route like that game, a home opener against the Argos in 2019. He can take it 90 something yards, just really strong in that regard, strong in the return game too. So I'm really excited to see what he has to offer. And then 2020 first selection for the Riders, Keaton Schaefer Baker. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I haven't seen them on TV yet because we didn't have a 2020 season, but another Canadian out of the University of Guelph that I think can be a difference maker in the offense. So a lot of different options that the Riders can kind of play with here. And I think the receiving core is really strong. And defensively, again, I'll kind of cover this on the weaknesses. Their secondary, Ed Gainey, Mike Edom, Nick Marshall. I mean, those three right there is a good starting point. And then you had McRae not last year in 2019, really solidify himself in that opposite cornerback position. So I think it's kind of funny. The skill positions are the strongest right now for the Riders, and they have some things to figure out in some of the more trench areas. But I mean, if Cody Fajardo can just buy a split second of time, I mean, he has the weapons to throw to. So
hopefully his back holds up.
Oh, God damn it. Well, if not, then we have Paxton Lynch and throw the ball. So let's shift over to the Alouettes, Auzzie. When you walk into the season, what position are you thinking like, okay, no matter if X, Y, Z happens, I know that at least my team has A.
Yeah, I look at the offense in general. I would exclude the offensive line. I think there's some question marks there, but the offensive skill positions, like you had said, for the Riders. So we get Geno Lewis back, who had over 1,100 yards last year. I was asking on our episode with Kelsey Fender.
Yeah.
I was wondering about Quan Brave if he'd be back. He's back. He had over 800 yards. He was a big play guy. And then we got Namon Roosevelt, who was one of my favorite players on the Riders. Like,
there we go. Right?
I used to watch lots of Riders with Shay, and that would be one guy that I was like, he is always, if you need a sure-handed guy, he's your guy.
Like the Larry Fitzgerald of the CFL, man.
Exactly.
Not to like Larry's Larry, but like, as far as sure hands go, that's your guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm really happy to have somebody like that. And then William Stanback is back from his brief NFL stint. So at running back position there. So having the offense come back together when we had so many free agents, we were able to bring that core group back. I'm really excited to see what they can do in a second year under Khari Jones and Vernon Adams. We talked about quarterback duos in your article. I think those two combined with these offensive pieces poised for some barn burners, that's for sure.
She gets spicy, man. Yeah. Man, if the Riders play the Alouettes, I forget what week they meet, but that's gonna be a high flying on the game if these defenses still have some things to work on.
Speaking of defenses, we can segue right to the weaknesses of the Alouettes.
Montreal weaknesses. Let's do it. I like it.
So before free agency, I would say the defense in general, but I think they did a pretty good job at shoring up the trenches on that side of the ball, getting Almondo Sewell and Nick Usher to kind of highlight the additions there. And then my kind of where I'm questioning is the secondary. We did get a new defensive coordinator and DB coach, Baron Miles from the Elks. And he coached the third best scoring defense in the CFL. So in 2019, we were the third worst. So I'm hoping that we can flip the switch there. And so for me, it's the secondary that I'm worried about, and getting a guy like Baron Miles, hopefully he can turn that around. But as of right now, Taylor Loeffler retired just last week, and we lose Deontay Evans, who is the top corner in the league, to Hamilton. So a couple key losses there that were supposed to really shore up our back end, but Loeffler got injured in that game against Calgary that we saw, and Deontay Evans leaving. That's two big holes to fill, and now we hope that Greg Reed and
Patrick Level should
Patrick
be able to fill
Level,
in. Yeah.
Hopefully those guys. Chris Aki, our friend of the pod, hopefully he can get on some snaps and at linebacker there.
Defensive weapon, he can play anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Put him at linebacker, safety. Let's see it all. And so yeah, I'm hoping that we can get that turnaround there. But the big thing last year or 2019 was I think we just lacked too much of a pass rush, and that probably let our secondary out to dry.
Mm-hmm.
So with the additions that we have, I think we'll be able to at least pressure the quarterback a little bit more. Like Nick Usher and Armando Sewell, they combined for 14 sacks in 2019, and we had 27 as a team. So just those two alone are over half of our production in 2019, which is nice to add. So I'm really hoping that with those getting after it, the secondary will be better. But as of right now, that's the biggest question mark for me, the biggest weakness.
There we go. Well, that's probably pretty. I like that analysis. And it's kind of funny the Riders falls into the same aspect with maybe even a little more weakness on the offensive line. But I want to talk about that Sam linebacker spot, which could have been a really big weakness for the Riders, but was patched over really brilliantly. I think, the loss of Moncrief to the NFL was pretty big, and he was really great at, you could find him in the backfield sacking the quarterback. He'd be putting in run fits on the run plays. And also he'd be getting pick sixes and stuff because he was really great in coverage. And so what the Riders have done, they've moved Lucius Purifoy from his halfback spot and put him at the Sam linebacker spot. And there's been a lot of guys that when you look at their careers, like Keon Raymond, even former Stampeder, you look at me like, oh, that's a DB. But like the Sam linebacker spot in the CFL, is so unique that like these DB types can just slide in and they're called a linebacker, but like they're like Chris Aki, they're just a defensive weapon.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's one of the most unique positions in my mind in football as a whole, NFL or CFL, but just based on what they do. Like we talk about some of these defensive gadget players that come in the NFL draft. Like what was that one that went to Arizona 2 drafts ago?
Isaiah Simmons.
Right. And I just think like, man, imagine him in the CFL where you just put him at that Sam linebacker spot and watch him go to work. Obviously the Riders have some holes to fill on defense still with Solomon Elamimian gone, but Larry Dean signing is really huge. Cameron Judge loss is big. So that will linebacker spot is something that's of concern to me. They have Micah Tights there, and then they have the Herman Reed brothers. And then after that, it kind of becomes a little more murky as far as guys that could potentially come in and contribute. I mean, CFL.ca released these depth charts, and the will linebacker spot is eight players deep. So, I mean, take your pick on who can fill that spot. The loss of Charleston Hughes is pretty big too. Still have AC Leonard on the other side. Freddie Bishop III is going to come in, 31 years old, has experience in the CFL to, try to fill that void on the other side, but you can't just replace Charleston Hughes. Like it just doesn't happen. I love how they went back and got Micah Johnson, was in Saskatchewan in 2019, left for BC in 2020. Season didn't happen, back in Riderville in 2021. So what a journey. But the big one that I want to focus on obviously is the offensive line. Talked about the skill positions, talked about Cody Fajardo. Running back, you're coming back with William Powell. I was going to say Norman Powell. I think Zach did that one time on the basketball podcast. But, Keenan LaFrance. So there's still some potential depth there at the running back position. Powell is in his 30s, so I kind of worry about his durability. But the offensive line, we had Brandon Labatt say he's not playing in the 2021 season, kind of like a COVID opt-out. If you want to compare it to that, everyone's kind of panicking or saying like, oh, it's because of the restrictions. And maybe it is with the COVID restrictions, but if he has a family and he doesn't want to live in a hotel or something like that, then maybe that's his business. So I respect that. But yeah, call it a COVID opt-out, could be back for 2022. But yeah, like I mentioned before, lost Darius Bladek, lost Shepley to the NFL, lost Philip Blake. I believe Jacoby Cofield even retired too. So that leaves Terrence Vaughn at left tackle. Schramm also retired too. So thankfully the Riders have been smart and invested in their offensive line. Logan Bandy, they got into the steal of a draft this past year. And then also they got in the 2020 draft, Maitland Riley out of the University of Saskatchewan, I believe. So a couple of young guys that might have to come in pretty quickly and prove what they're worth, because there's been some losses there. Still have Dan Clark, and then they signed Evan Johnson out of Ottawa. And so I thought that was pretty huge too, just to kind of patch things over.
Yeah.
But it's going to be on these young guys to really take that next step. So yes, it's a position of weakness, but it's not like there's not talent waiting there in the wings. They're just not ready yet. So that's my biggest concern with the Riders offense. And speaking of the 2021 draft class, I should also mention Nelson Lacombo talked about that. I think it's that one bad. My bad. I think it's Nelson. I want to be sure though. Go back. And then also Terrell Jana at the wide receiver position. So I forgot to mention him in my breakdown of the strengths of the Riders. Terrell Jana is going to be huge. I think he contribute right away. And Nelson Lacombo is, could fill in that Sam linebacker spot or at the halfback spot, but I don't know if he'll be contributing much more than special teams. So if I had to kind of pinpoint the Riders' biggest weaknesses, it's probably offensive line and then pass rush with the loss of Charleston Hughes. I mean, you're losing double-digit sacks there, which sucks.
No doubt.
So that all being said, Auzzie, and, kind of knowing that there's 14 games and just kind of taking an all-encompassing view of this thing, when December 1st rolls around and we're ready to head into playoffs, what's the Montreal Alouettes record going to be, and what place will they be in the Eastern Division?
Well, I was actually going to mention this. So Bodog, the betting site, has the Alouettes at 6 games.
Ooh.
The over-under set at 6 games. And for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, it's 7.5.
Oh.
Yeah. So I thought those were both rather low.
What do they have Toronto going set at fucking 13? I bet.
Yeah,
or what?
probably.
Yeah.
So I thought for sure the Alouettes are a 500 team. And if they're 500, that's 7 wins.
Yeah.
So I would be betting the
smash
over for
the
sure.
over.
Yeah, smash the over. And then same with the Riders. Like, they won 13 games in 2019. I know you lose a big sack producer in Charleston Hughes, but again, as you mentioned, kind of the offense, and maybe this is just a little bit of optimism, classic like off-season optimism. But like with the offense, if the offensive line can click, which is a big if, then you would be like, I think 8 wins is more than fair for that. But looking at the Alouettes schedule, I was not impressed with the start. So our first 3 games are the Edmonton Elks in week 2, Calgary Stampeders, and then the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So arguably, depending on how the Elks do under Elizondo, I've been calling them Elk Elizondo.
Oh, I wonder if they know that yet. That's free marketing right there.
Seriously. Depending how they do there, if they are as good as they can be with that offense, I would be worried about starting 0-3, and then all of a sudden the Alouettes are in a little bit of a hole to climb out of. But I tried giving them 1 win out of there, maybe against the Elks. So coming out of that 1-2, I thought, okay, we can be 7-7 or 8-6 would be very fair. After that, we got 4 games against the Red Blacks, and I think they're going to be probably the biggest wild card this year, just depending on who they have at quarterback and kind of how things click there. The Argonauts, they're going to be pretty good, I think, but they've got like super team vibes where it's just like, is this really going to happen? Could be just utter chaos there too. Absolutely. So as far as the official prediction, I'm going to go a little bit more on the optimistic side and say 8-6, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 7-7. But I'd be smashing the over if you're betting. Smash that over.
I like at least talking in even record prediction terms. Hey, it's nice not having to say 12-5 or something.
Oh God, that's going to take some getting used to in the NFL.
Gross. Saskatchewan wise, you mentioned, the Alouettes, toughest part of their schedule. I'm looking at the Riders schedule, and they literally have 3 straight games against the Calgary Stampeders. I didn't realize this when we first were talking about it. But they have a bye week on week 11. So week 9, they're at Calgary. Week 10, they're home against Calgary. Week 11 bye. Week 12 back at Calgary. So good for me, because I'll be going to lots of Rider games, and they'll be playing Calgary. So that'll be fun. For the Riders, though, that's a tough matchup, and a lot of people are kind of low on Calgary. I've been listening to some other CFL podcasts, and they're kind of a little lower on Calgary. They've had their issues on the offensive line, losing Erdos, Shane Bergman, and someone else that's not coming to mind right now. The receiving core, they have Kamar Jordan coming back, but they've lost him, Reggie Bagleton and some other big contributors in the past couple of years.
Oh yeah, Bagleton went to Chicago, right?
Green Bay. Yeah, Jerron Brescison is in Toronto now. So a couple different things. Eric Rogers is gone. So Kamar Jordan hasn't played in 3 years. I know he's working hard and going to come back, and he's going to be that leader in the locker room. Whereas before, I think he was kind of more like the up and coming guy, and now he is the dog there, right? So really excited to see how he does there. But that's going to be a tough stretch for Saskatchewan. And you talked about the over-under for the Riders set at 7. I think, looking at the rest of the West Division, BC, I don't have a lot of faith in still. Like, I don't want to write off Mike Riley, but it's tough. Winnipeg, I'm never assuming injuries, but I really just don't like to think about the depth behind Zach Collaros in Winnipeg. It's, oh God, I was just looking him up today, but it's something not Chris Strevler. Nope, that's not it. Anyways, I don't even know who their backup is. I knew it earlier today. Don't remember. That's not good.
Yeah,
so it's not a good depth back there. They seem to be confident in it. Khari, in many people's minds, seem to be retooling, but I'm not sure about that. And the Elks have a whole new identity, but they could be strong. I think Riders 10-4 is a safe bet, and I'm going to say first in the West.
Holy, 10-4.
I think 10 gets you first. I'm trying to think how it looks with 14 games. Like 11-3 would be a pretty crazy record to only have 3 losses, but
well, I mean, 4 losses in 18 or 17 games.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, it's possible.
You never know. 11-3, 10-4. I think 10-4 is more safe though. They could drop 2 of those 3 against Calgary. They're
going to lose October 30th against the Alouettes.
Against the Alouettes, yeah. And they typically split against Winnipeg. So
yeah, that's right.
Maybe that's 5 losses. 9-5. If it's 9 wins, second place, 10 wins, I think gets you first place. And then after that, I don't think we'll spoil the playoff predictions quite yet. Is that a good idea? Okay, we're gonna keep that under wraps. But in any event, guys, super excited for the CFL season coming up. Riders and Alouettes both do appear to have bright futures. The only teams that we really down on when we preview them, and maybe we'll preview them together, is the Lions and the Ottawa Red Blacks. A little worried about those guys, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Thank you guys all for tuning in. This is a little bit different episode. If it got a little awkward at times because we haven't done this before. The last time we did an in-person episode, just Auzzie and I, we didn't have the video element to it yet. So looking all over the place, looking at Auzzie awkwardly.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it went pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with it. Be sure to follow all the Amateur Agency channels, guys. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the Amateur Agency. We're on YouTube. If you're watching us, you obviously know that. And if you want to listen to us while you're driving, if you don't have AC in your house and you need a little break and you want to just hop in your AC vehicle and just drive for a bit and listen to something, we're on your favorite podcast platform too: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. So you can find us all there. Our social media handles, we've plugged them enough. You know where to find us: Auzzie and Steve. Zach will be back, I'm sure, when we preview the Argos. And Auzzie, any last words before we wrap things up?
Well, if you're listening and you're not on the YouTube, go over to YouTube and subscribe.
Hit that subscribe button, guys.
Or just like a video, maybe.
And
just something. Give us a little positive feedback.
You bet. And you guys know what? If you're new to the podcast, we've name dropped a couple guys: Chris Aki, Kamar Jordan, Keon Raymond. We've been really blessed and fortunate enough to no big deal. We've been really fortunate enough. I was going with a humble route, and you just came no big deal there, and I was like, now we're like asshole. But
a little good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, these guys are a little cocky. It's like, you know what? They're actually humble. But, fortunate enough and humbled to be able to interview with them, and it's some really great episodes. You can find those back in our listing there. KJ is easy because he was episode 88. He's number 88.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Aki was episode
112, maybe.
Yeah. Kelsey Fender, episode 103, I want to say. So you'll find him, you'll see him. There's
just
no
go
sense.
back and listen to all of them. Start at number 1 and just put us on loop until you get right through.
Ignore how awkward number 1 is. It's probably more awkward than this. Man. That was dark days. But hey, we made it here, and we're living the dream. So it's hot, but that means the CFL season's right around the corner. So until then, until next week, guys, thank you. God bless and Godspeed.
Peace.